Welcome back to the second annual Nat King Cole Generation Hope Educators Conference. Our next clinician is Dr. Gregory Drain. Gregory Drain, a native of Miami, Florida, earned his bachelor's degree in music education and music performance saxophone from Bethune-Cookman University in Daytona Beach, Florida, holding a master's degree in music education from Penn State and a PhD in music education also at Penn State. Dr. Drain directs the Penn State Marching Blue Band and oversees the athletic band programs, including the Fall Athletic Band, the Pride of the Lions basketball pep bands, and the Power Players Hockey pep band. He is active as an arranger and marching band drill designer. In addition to his duties with the athletic band program, he assists with conducting concert bands and is an instructor for music courses offered to non-majors for general arts credit. Dr. Drain is an active researcher with interest in African-American contributions to American music education and leadership in the music classroom, in addition to historical musical ensembles. Without further delay, speaking on accessing college through music, please welcome Dr. Gregory Drain. Good afternoon, Dr. Drain.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Mr. Rhodes, for having me. And thank you, all of you, for being here today and allowing me this opportunity to share with you. As I look across the screen, I see that everybody has their screensaver up. And as a teacher who's been teaching on Zoom these past few years, if you can show your face, I would love to see your beautiful faces, all right? And I know most of you have been teaching behind Zoom and things like that. So if you can't, we totally understand. But thank you all so much that if you can. And then also, I'm gonna have some questions for you. All right, so I'm gonna have some questions from you that I'm interested in hearing your thoughts as a part of this presentation as we look at accessing college through music and all of our students who are in music. And this doesn't necessarily just go for music. I think it's more so accessing college, period. With that, I'll go ahead and share my screen and bring up my presentation really quickly. And let's see if I can hit the right button. Is that it? Right. I just said all of these times that I presented on Zoom and still can't figure out how to actually share my screen and the right thing to come up. So thank you all for your patience with me. Again, my name is Dr. Gregory Drain. I am a Miami native, but I have been in Pennsylvania for the past 19 years, and I've been working at Penn State officially in a faculty position for the past 17 years. And most of my experience has come working at the college level and working through universities. And so I want to share with you some of the things that I have seen during my time here. And I'd like to talk first about what I call the barriers of college access, okay? And so I kind of broke it down into these three categories, and this is where I'm going to ask you all to engage. And if you have any thoughts and responses, I'd love to hear them. But first, thinking about from a high school student's perspective, going to college, and those of you who have worked with our high school students, what are some of the barriers that are in place that colleges and universities already have that you see your students have to overcome? And that's me pausing for you if you're thinking about those responses, some of the things. I see Carolyn, raise your hand, please jump in.
Financial.
Financial, right? That's one of them. What are some others? Thank you for getting us going, Carolyn. I'm going to call you on the carpet, Mr. Rhodes. What are some of the things that you saw when you were at the high school level and the students trying to get into college?
You know, I thought it was more so just not knowing what they don't know, you know, making sure that they probably need to take the test ACT more than one time.
Right.
Talking to their guidance counselors in regards to, what school fits for them, because a lot of kids, they're sitting at the lunchroom talking about, I'm going to go visit this school, visit that school, but some kids don't have that access to go visit schools. So they just go with
Yeah.
what everyone else says.
Yeah. So being able to get to the school, this process of getting into the school, which might be slightly different for each school. So us not knowing about it, the education of that, what is this university's process? We think it's all the same across the board everywhere, but it's slightly different at each university that you have. I see some Milan put GPA and grades. Yes, that is a barrier. Okay, from being able to access that college and university's education. Any others want to chime in really quickly and we can move on to this next one, but any other barriers that the college and universities already have in place that we perceive? So what about the barriers that society has put in place? Or that we believe, or the perceptions of those barriers that society has put in place for our students to unlock that college education. And this is one we might have to think about a little bit, right? Right? The images that we see all the time of what a college student looks like, right? The ones that are coming across the TV. Go ahead, Christina, please jump right in.
I think the idea that if you don't have the right major or degree, then you can't get a certain job.
Yep. Yeah. So you got to go to school. It's going to cost a lot of money. So you better pick a major that you're going to make a lot of money, right? What other barriers has our society put in place? And thank you for that, Christina. That was a good one. Okay, we talked about a little bit what a certain student looks like that attends a certain college or university, right? If you got this personality, you might want to go to this college or these type of things. So all of these other indirect messages that students are receiving. And now let's move to this next one, the barriers that our students believe are in place. And I'm going to throw one out there right now. We're talking about it all the time, race, right? If I'm of this color or if I'm this race, I might not want to go to this school. What are some of the other things that we think our students believe are barriers for them attending colleges and universities? I'm going to call on you again, Mr. Rhodes, because I know you've had this experience. So go ahead, share with us.
I was just about to jump in because it might be society and what are in place, the two bullets. But I think sometimes students will figure, well, if it's not a school that's on a major network TV, then it must not be a good school to attend.
Yeah.
And you see some universities that have just their enrollment has blossomed, that they didn't have football before, and now that they have football, they're getting ESPN, I hate to say it, advertised, but game day, and now all of a sudden those students are feeling the need to be there. So not knowing that there are tons of schools out there that's accessible to them, and not following what they see on the TV.
No, that is a great point, right? So we know there are some great colleges, universities in our local area, but they're not on TV. They don't have the sporting team that's out there promoting that brand, or the small liberal arts college or university that has no sports at all, that you only know because a family member may have gone there. All right, so all of those things are coming into play. I see expectations and pressure to stick with a certain major, right? If you want to be an education major, then you need to go to this school. Don't go to that school, or do this and do that. And then also the stigma against colleges and communities. Okay, so those are all of the barriers, right? And we haven't even scratched the surface. We haven't even scratched the surface. And now let's add the next layer. Let's add race. Let's add gender. Let's add all of these other things that our students are facing as they are trying to access and unlock this college education. So as I looked at this and I thought about this, I kind of broke this down into access points. And I'm going to tell you all right now, I cheated on this preparation for this. for this presentation. My wife worked in the admissions office. So her and I discuss these issues all the time. Yes, I'm the band director, but she works in the admissions office. And we talked about, as I was always focused on recruiting, right? I began to dig deep and seeing how the admissions offices are looking at and viewing these things. And they kind of break it down into these access points or engagement points where they are working with. So another part of the barrier that we talked about at the beginning was that a lot of people just don't know. We just don't know. So it is my hopes to begin to also educate you all, and you being centers of influence, to help share this with other families as they begin to engage in the process of seeking a college and university. But they kind of break it down into this inquiry phase, all right? And I'm going to tell you a little secret. Colleges and universities are creating this inquiry phase and starting them earlier than they used to. So we always say to our students, when you're in the 10th or 11th grade, you might want to start thinking about college or university. The college admissions teams are now getting to students, you ready for this? In the 6th and 7th grade. They are now creating touch points with students while they are now in middle school, okay? But most of us, and even myself included, I was always heard, well, once you get in the 10th grade or the 11th grade, you might want to start thinking about college, right? Okay, but it's really earlier than that our colleges are connecting with them. Why are they connecting? They are recruiting. They are getting the student to think that coming to their university is the next natural step for them in their progression. Okay, so if we are not allowing our students to engage in that inquiry process earlier, then they kind of miss that recruiting phase. You guys with me on this? They'll miss that recruiting phase, and also the things that are happening during that recruitment phase. The student is getting to know the university, and the university is getting to know that student as well. So starting this inquiry phase earlier is the best, And here's this next access point. They call it the prospect phase, right? So now I've gone from the inquiry phase, thinking about college. Now I want to be a prospective college student. You got the application, and then this one is very specific here, music specific, which is the audition process. And we're going to talk about this. And then the next one is the actual admissions process, when the university makes the decision if they're giving a no or a yes to a student. And I have this link written here very intentionally. Is the no response really a no? And we're going to talk about that a little bit more later. And then the last point of access point is the actual enrollment. Does that all make sense? And I'm going to pick on you, Christina, because you talked to me earlier. Does that flow make sense in your mind to you?
Yeah, it does. I'm thinking about, I teach kids who are 4th grade through 12th grade.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Were you aware of this process here?
No, like 6th grade, that took me aback.
Yes. Yep. That I know here at my university, they are now engaging students at the 6th and 7th grade level.
Wow.
So guess what that does for them? They have increased the prospect pool.
Yeah.
Right? Awesome. Thank you so much, Christina. So now let's talk about this next thing, mitigating the barriers at this access point. Okay. And so again, these inquiry phases, and this is where I believe as educators, we can make an impact. And I'll tell you, I went to Bethune-Cookman University, right? When I went to Miami Norland Senior High School, I had not thought about Bethune-Cookman. Right? I had my mind set on another school when I was in the 9th grade. And I remember my teacher, my band director, he looked at me and he said, you know what? You would look good at this school, even though it was a school he didn't go to. He said, you know, you look like one of those guys that would go to the Bethune-Cookman. And I guess he called it. And it wasn't necessarily that I think he was fortune telling. It just opened my eyes. Like, yes, I can go to Bethune-Cookman. I can go there. You know, I had just not saw myself there before. Me going to Penn State for my master's, yet again, my college director said, you know what? You look like you could make it at Penn State. Right? Right or wrong. So us, our students being able to see themselves at these universities, at these colleges, no matter what they are, 2-year, 4-year universities or institutions. All right. So this is very, very important. And then also encouraging or taking these tours to these universities. Most of them, all of them have a whole recruitment team ready to give students tours. And you can request a tour guide that may look looks like you. Hey, do you have an African-American tour guide? Okay. And why? Because I might feel more comfortable, or even talking to that person, I might be, you know, just being culturally more comfortable to say, hey, is this a safe place for African-Americans? You know, I want to be able to ask that question. You know, and I think we all do be able to ask, hey, is my student going to be safe here? So yes, these are things that our students and our students can do. Let's talk about this prospects phase. I know I'm going pretty quickly. I get so excited about this stuff. So if you guys have any questions, please jump right in and slow me down. Drain, can you back up, go to this? Or Drain, I had this thought on this one. So to my two folks whose video are on, if it's going well, just keep nodding your head. I appreciate that. It gives me some feedback and affirmation. So the prospect phase, the applications, right? We know, again, this financial piece can be a barrier. We can request that fees be waived, all right? Do identify if you are in an underrepresented population of that university. These universities are now begging for diversity at their schools. Make sure we are identifying and saying, yes, I am a part of that underrepresented population at your university. And I'm being very specific in how I word that, okay? So they may have an underrepresented Black population at Penn State University, you know, but that might not be the same for a different university. All right, so those dynamics and demographics change as well, but all being sure to identify, and then also those majors. Note all of your extracurricular activities. Okay, so universities are now kind of going back to this holistic look at a student. Where back in the day, in our day, it was literally, you got the GPA. All right, do you have the SAT and test scores? All right, now they're kind of moving back to that holistic look. So we want to make sure that we're encouraging our students to list all of these extracurricular activities. And then even specifically, if they're in a music ensemble, and some universities still have that box that they check on the application process. Check that box. And I'm going to tell you why a little bit later. Okay. And those who are in music, contact those music ensembles directors. Okay, there has been many times where it was the universe was smiling on me. I was short a triangle player that year, and then magically a triangle player contacted me and, hey, I'm thinking about coming to this school. I wanted to talk with you. I'm like, outstanding. Okay, so there are going to be some of those shortages that may be going on within smaller parts of the university, such as the School of Music, that the larger university admissions may not be aware of. Does that make sense there? Right? So now the School of Music director can communicate to admissions, hey, this is a student we are highly interested in, you know, and then the conversation happens. Now the student has an advocate at the university, right? Because at the end of the day, there's somebody at the table saying yes or no to these applications. But now we have an advocate that's on campus that says, yes, I believe this student would be successful here at this university. And particularly because I know they play triangle. Okay. All right. And then one other thing, music specific, those students, take a lesson with the person on that campus. All right. If you're a triangle player, you find the triangle teacher and have the student take a lesson with that triangle player before the official audition. Why? Why would they want that to happen? Because the student may have some deficiencies. That instructor provides them information and how to get better. And then the student comes back during the audition and that instructor is able to see, oh, look at that. This student has grown in this short amount of time. As opposed, so now they have two or more than one data point to make an evaluation of that student. Is that making sense, everybody?
Dr. Drain, I'll just jump in on that point because I think that's really critical, especially in these day and age, having that private lesson with that studio teacher, because it has to be a match. It has to be chemistry because you have to see that person and prepare for that per person weekly, sometimes twice a week. I remember I had a friend who, came in to my university with me and the teacher was like, you got to change your armature. And they were like, they left. They just ended up going to another school just because of armature change. It wasn't academic. It was just the chemistry where that student did not feel like they need to make that kind of change. So you learn a whole lot through those private lessons. We came from the kind of same community. We didn't have private lessons coming up. So who I had as a studio teacher was who I had. And I just was like, okay, I'll make my changes and do what have you. But it's a different day and age now, where that's, you have to, have that kind of compassion for your students. So I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah, and then the other part is now that everybody's used to Zoom, so all the professors know how to teach on Zoom now. So they're able to, back in the day, you would have had to drive 7-8 hours to go to that professor. Now they're happy to give a lesson. Some may charge a small fee, but they're recruiting as well. They're recruiting as well. So now you're trying to find that match. And once again, when it comes down to decision time, the student has another advocate. And honestly, I see it come down to this so often, right? The student who has no advocate versus a student who has an advocate. Who you think gonna win? The student who has that internal advocate. All things being equal, let me be real there. All things being equal, well, this professor is telling me that they really want this student. We got one spot left. Boom, I'm going to trust their judgment on this. That helps tip the scales, in those kind of things. Also, in this admissions decision, is a no really a no? Okay, there's always multiple avenues. Okay, at some universities, they may have what we call branch campuses. At Penn State, we call them Commonwealth campuses. Students may get placed at a Commonwealth campus, at a branch campus, or things like that. Or there are also there's a remedial process a student may need to go through in order to get into a particular major. So all of these avenues are available, but at the end of the day, what happens is we are not as familiar with the process to know that, yeah, all right, this one was a soft no. This one was a soft no. Okay, now this one was finally a hard no. And then enrollment. One of the other barriers that I often see is people just not responding back to the university in time to confirm that they are coming to the university. If you don't confirm, then they're going to give that spot to someone else. Christina, please go ahead.
Can you address the musician who's not a music major?
Oh, yes. I love this person. I deal with that person all the time in the marching band. My marching band is about 325 students. Only 30%, less than 30% is music majors. The largest percentage of the students are engineering majors. So, which is also a very competitive college to get into here at Penn State. So again, identifying, and I'm glad you brought this up, when I told you to make sure that the student identifies that they're in band, I asked for that information from the admissions office. Anybody that says they're in band, I'm going to now create a contact with them. Okay, to begin that engagement process, to begin that recruitment process, to inform them of this application process. So that's really how I kind of try to help mitigate some of those barriers. Because at the end of the day, sometimes I always heard, well, I just didn't know. And I'm like, all right, well, you got a coach now. Let me coach you through this process to get in. But those folks who are non-music majors are just as important because on many campuses, they have ensembles for non-music majors as well. Our orchestra, we have a phenomenal orchestra. Maybe 20% of the orchestra is music majors. And the rest is made up of non-majors, students who are in graduate school and things like that, but they played violin all their life and they're phenomenal. Okay, I've had some of my best trumpet players were pre-med and who are doctors now, and again, them being a part of the band. And this last point, and this is going to be me bragging on myself a little bit, but our band has a retention rate of a 98%. 98% of all eligible students who participate in my band return. So I'm always saying, if you want to make sure they graduate, you better make sure they get in the blue band, right? Because they're going to return and they're going to get their grades, because there's a whole nother thing that happens being a part of the band and that retention part, because you got an intact community that happens instantly within the first week of being there. But enough about me. And so I just wanted to share a couple of things that I do to help mitigate these barriers for my band program and also the School of Music that I have. I have a thing that I call Forward March, the Blue Band Experience. And I'll tell you now, we're challenged with recruiting underrepresented students at Penn State. So this is one of the ways that I've tried to mitigate that barrier. It's called the Blue Band Experience. And I invite students 10th grade through 12th to come and be in the blue band for a day, right? And it literally costs them nothing to do that. All they have to do is get here and sign up for the program. And then I take it a step further, where I reach out to those predominantly Black bands, predominantly Latino bands, and I pay for them to come here and bring their entire band to participate, to say that, hey, Penn State is a place for you. Again, tearing down some of those barriers. And then some of the other things that I do, and of course, my wife being in admissions at the time, I was able to engage in the admissions recruiting events, because I kind of recruit differently, if you will. I want the students to come and apply to Penn State, right? And then once they're in, then I recruit them to be in the band. So it's a slightly different process. That's the process for me, but it's a little bit different for other schools. I know there are some schools where the band director can call admissions and say, I want this student. And it happens. And we need to be able to lean on that, being able to utilize those skills that these students have done. And then one other thing for me, if a student isn't admitted to main campus, we don't call it main campus here. We call it University Park. But this other opportunity that I have is that they can audition directly for me. And if they have a successful audition, I can go to admissions and say, I want this student moved to main campus, if they're placed at a branch campus, if you will. I'm using that terminology because I know you all are familiar with it, but my Penn State people would be yelling at me right now for using that terminology. We call it university. Each campus, we call it by its name, and they're all a Commonwealth campus for us. So those are some of the things that I'm trying to do to begin to mitigate these barriers and to access into school, but also utilizing the students' musical skills that they have there. And that was all I have for you. I hope I didn't go too long. I hope it wasn't too short, but really wanted to provide you all this information to be able to share with our students and help guide them through these admissions processes coming into college. And we hope that more of our students can access college through this.
Great. So I know this was very interactive, but to our audience, please feel free to send me questions and I can ask Dr. Drain so we can continue the flow of this presentation, but I already have some already. Dr. Drain, let's go back to, let's start backwards. How many campuses do you guys have? since you have, the main campus and then these other campuses? How many campuses are those?
I know there's at least 10.
Wow. Oh my.
Yeah. And so the way Penn State works is that, for example, if there's a student that may not have the grades just yet for a particular major, they will send them to a Commonwealth campus, in your case, a branch campus, again, kind of that remedial program, and they will do like a year or two there before they get transferred to the main campus. Okay. And so therefore, and sometimes it's not even an issue of them having grades. Sometimes it's an issue of space. The student applied late and things like that. So again, this student says, oh man, I got placed at this campus, and they come to me and they say, Dr. Drain, I play sousaphone, and I'm like, oh really? Let me hear you play. They do an audition for me. Then I go over to admissions and say, hey, I really want this student, and they can move that student to the main campus. But we have over 10 campuses with you, and some of them you are able to obtain 4 years, a 4-year degree at one of those campuses, but the majority of them you do 1 or 2 years at those campuses and then transfer to University Park.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Going back, I'm big in social media, and I follow a lot of colleges and universities. And so it just dawned on me when you talked about the touch points and recruitment at middle schools, at the middle school level. At first I was like, really? That's really happening? But when I scroll through Twitter and I see University of such and such, journalism camp for high school kids, band camp for grades 6 through 12, or literacy camp, or some sort of, they're all sort of these subject areas. They're having these camps, and they're bringing on these students onto their campus, and they're pretty much recruiting them because they want those students to have a great experience. And it never really dawned on me that those are touching points that they're doing early on. It's pretty fascinating when you brought it. The connection was made just now.
Yeah. So even for me, I told you I have my blue band experience where I bring the high school students on. And as a reason, I picked 10 through 12, 10, 11, 12, because research shows that if a student visits a campus 3 times, they believe going to that school is the next logical step in their progression. Right. So we know, Penn State is kind of remote. So they're just getting to them earlier. All right. So the more touch points that they have, they become more familiar with the school, and then they're applying and they're coming here. So and that at Penn State, we have so many students who, my dad went here, my mom went here, and even students who are in the band. I was coming to Penn State football games since I was 4 years old. I didn't have to recruit them. They were coming. Right. They done been to Penn State games all their life. So it's the next natural thing, or at least that's how they feel. It's the next natural thing for them. So that is what these universities are doing. And again, we want to make sure that our students are engaging in these programs that they're offering.
Right. And going back, and it's probably going to be a little bit more deeper question, a little tougher. Onboarding the first generational student coming from their family, the first person coming to college, is there anything in place that you know of at the collegiate level to welcome these sort of students? Not to differentiate them from the freshman class, but I do think that there should be some extra attention to students who are probably the first to attend from their families. Are you aware of that, or are there things coming into place for that?
Yeah, most universities that I know have a program for first generation college students, and it doesn't matter their race or anything like that. That's just that first generation college student. They have programs. I know we have a robust program here at Penn State, and then many universities, and even as a part of their retention, they have these first year programs, period. So on top of that, to help students get adjusted to college life, and then students who are first generation are provided additional support to be able to make that transition into college life. So I've seen that all around at various universities, and not just Penn State.
And so, deeper dive, coming from the Miami Gardens area, attending predominantly African American schools through middle school, high school, and what have you, going to Bethune-Cookman. What was that for you to come to College Station?
Yeah, so coming to Penn State College, man, it was
State College. I'm sorry,
yeah,
State College.
it was a culture shock. I'll be very honest. So number one, coming from the regional South to the Northeast, that was a completely different culture. And then coming from a historically Black college to a predominantly white college, that was a whole nother factor. So even when I was able to find people that looked like me, most of them were from the Philadelphia, New York area, which has, if you will, for the vernacular, a whole different vibe, so I was still kind of a outsider in that regard. And here I was 20, 23, 24 years old at the time. And but being a part of the band and that musical community, it really locked me in. I'll be very honest. And I'm like, man, I'm 24, 25, 24 years old, more mature. And I'm thinking, well, what would this experience be like for, an 18-year-old, if you will? And so that, of course, again, me being a huge advocate of being in the band. And then I would say any of those cultural barriers that I experienced with inside the School of Music, just being frank here and being candid, being one of the few Blacks that was in the building, I was able to tear down quickly because of my playing ability on my instrument, and that's what I love about music. If you're good, you're good, and people are going to give you your props and your just due. And if I may share, I don't know how much time we got, but I did my dissertation on the first all-Black Navy band.
Let's talk about that. We do have some time. Feel free, please.
Yeah. So I did my dissertation on the first all-Black Navy band of World War II. The Navy was the last branch to racially integrate, and they were kicking and screaming the whole way. And so they decided, we're going to do this, but they decided to do it with musicians, with band members. And I'm sitting here like, duh, as always, we're dealing with some of these problems in our society right now. Let's just take a look back in history, how it was solved back then. Of course, it wasn't perfect, but they brought in an all-Black band to tear down racial barriers within their organization. And this is an organization that did not want integration, right? And they did it with musicians. So I am a huge advocate of the power of music and the power to being able to display our music ability to help us tear down so many of these barriers. And these guys did it. Within 2 years, they had droves of African Americans joining the navies to be in these various bands that they created there. So I always kind of just use that as an example, of being in the band and what it means, for those who do see you and do hear you playing your instrument. So I am a huge advocate of that. And then I experienced it myself. Like I said, I was a good musician. So that really helped tear down some of those cultural barriers that I had experienced coming into a predominantly white environment.
Great. And feel free again to ask questions here. Direct message me. There's no question that's not a bad question. I'll try to ask as many as possible. We do have one that came up right here that Dr. Drain, I'm probably going to tag team with you. I'll probably put it out there and I'll approach it first. But it's from Milan, I want to say. I'm going into my second year teaching. What are some common barriers you've seen from students at the middle school level, and how have you mitigated them? Without knowing all of my students, and how can I best prepare for things to address them as they arise? If you don't mind, I'll jump in first, and thank you, Milan, for that question. As a former band director and the K-12 arts administrator for the 10th largest school district in the country, one thing I would say in the band room is you want to give the band room a safe environment. You want to make sure students understand they feel safe there. They are wanted there. They are loved there. They are cared for there. You want them to make sure that that's the place they want to be. as a band director, I was at the last 15 minutes of every class, I would have students come in with a pass. Oh, I'm just coming back from English. Oh, I'm coming back from science, class. I'm just coming back from whatever class. I never had to write a pass for a kid to go extra 10 minutes to the English classroom. Never, because why? This was a safe place. I had a student tell me one time, and it didn't really hit me until maybe a few years later. The bell rung at the beginning of the day for the kids to go to their first period. And the student was all hanging out in my office, just chatting, because I always left my office open with me there for them to just have chat with their friends or what have you with me. And the student was leaving and said, Mr. Rhodes, you have the best job in the world. And I'm like, why do you say that? He said, you get to be in the band room all day long, like as if he was missing something. And that's what happens. The kids will come with a pass at the end of the period because they just, do they want to come practice? No, not really. They just want to come for the hang and just see if they're missing out on something. But that's the culture that you can bring to the band room to make them want to come. If they're coming to you before the bell rings in the morning, and they're coming to you after school, and they're coming through, if they can get to you during lunch, you're doing the right thing. And this has nothing to do with dropping the baton and what does your stance look like? Are you making sure you have a clear ictus? It's way beyond that. We're talking about making connections. So for me, breaking barriers is making sure all students feel accepted no matter who they are, what they are, where they're from, how they identify themselves, and to make sure that they are able to express themselves verbally and most important, musically, because that's the only area of the day where they can feel most expressive. That's my thoughts and my suggestions, because I've dealt with the high school and I've recruited a lot in the middle schools, and I've done a lot of work with the middle school. Middle school is rough. It's just a different beast. They're interesting. I'm gonna leave it like that. I love them, but they're very interesting. And there's a reason why I think I've always said I was a high school guy, but it's just you have to be in tune and you have to understand and stay current with them to make sure you make that connection. I know I said a whole lot, but that's where I stand on that. Dr. Drain.
Yeah, Mr. Rhodes answered all that question, and we both come from the same school of thought. And I have to add, there's nothing that I could really add to what he said, because I had learned so much from him as a young college student. I would visit his band room all the time to see what that meant. But I would like to reiterate, I used to think it was about the music and playing in tune and doing all of those things. And it is literally about it being a safe space. I cannot reiterate that anymore. In my program now, that is still the priority, especially here at a college, this being a safe space, and I know we're working on all of the diversity, equity, and inclusion things. But for me, it kind of goes into that. Being a safe place, being a place where they can be who they are. And then I found once that happened, then all the musical things that I asked about happen. And it actually goes way beyond their ability, because they can be safe here. I can be safe. I can make a mistake here, and I encourage them, make your mistakes here while I'm here to guide you. And therefore all the other things. And I'm like, all right, now I need you to play in tune. And of course, Dr. Drain, I'm gonna play it, and I'm gonna play in tune for you, and those are all the things. And I am smiling being able to share that, because I wish somebody would have literally said it like that to me as a second year teacher. I saw it, but I didn't understand it. Like I said, I would go to Mr. Rhodes, his band room, like I saw it, I felt it, I didn't understand it. But now, being where I am now, I understand this is what that was. It was a safe space for all of the students, and they will. And I tell you, you'll get this. I'm smiling again. Feel like I'm talking to myself about 3 or 4 years from now, when they start graduating from high school, and they're gonna come back to you and tell you and thank you for creating that safe space for them.
And just to piggyback off of that one more time too, at the end of the day, when you're starting to make that connection with the students, they don't want to let you down. You know, they will not. I mean, I've, you know, in my early years of teaching, I was like, oh, we got to do this, we got to do that. And there, you can't muscle it. It has to be finesse. It has to be organic. And I remember more at the end of my rehearsals, I'm like, you know, I wish we could have played that a little bit better. But you know, I guess we'll get it right. And the kids go, we're so sorry we let you down, Mr. Rhodes. And it was just, but they don't want to hurt you. They want you to be happy and proud of them. And so I didn't find myself overly being, you know, hard on them because of the fact of I knew they was willing to work extremely hard for me. And I think that's because, again, it goes back to them feeling accepted, them knowing that you will do any and everything for them. And honestly, between the band classes that we have and arts classes, they spend the most hours in our room more than anywhere else on that campus. So, you know, again, please reach out to us if you ever have some more questions regarding to that, because, you know, this is the area where we think it's most critical. Any other questions? Feel free to jump in and pop in to me. I'm going to ask you another question, Dr. Drain. We have about 12 minutes left. Going back to the blue band, and you kind of mentioned you talked to some bands from the more of the urban communities, but what are some things you're really trying to have in place as far as the diversity of the blue band, and tell us where we are right now with the numbers of equity and the numbers of diverse in your ensemble, and how do you see to keep riding the ship of equity and access for those students?
That's a great question, and I'm going to dodge, in full transparency, I'm going to dodge in regards to the numbers. I will say that it's not where I want it to be with that, particularly as it pertains to Black American students. I have been seeing an increase in Latino American students, but I think we're also seeing that increase happening at all universities. You know, that the Latino community are growing and attending colleges and universities now. So I am seeing that across the board, but I don't, with regards to Black Americans and in the blue band at Penn State, is certainly not where we want it to be. So we have some unique challenges in relationship to our area, if you will, that we are 3.5 hours away from every major city around us. So that has been a big hurdle for us. And then there being, you know, large universities in those metropolis areas. So we're kind of fighting those battles again. And then also that's our competition that we have to compete against in that regard. But some of the things that we're doing, again, I think is me getting out there. You know, I'm in my 7th year, and there's still people who eyebrows go up when they find out that I'm the band director now at Penn State, you know, who are alums who live in the area. You know, I still don't think people, know that. So those are some of the things that I'm doing, is also making sure that I get out and I'm going out and participating and helping out with high school bands around in the area so that they can visibly see. The area that I do have the most influence is with our graduate students. So I make the decision if they're going to be a grad student with us. So I've made sure that my staff is extremely diverse, and I'll boast that we're the most diverse staff in the Big Ten. I will say that very proudly in regards to what we have, and we have, even in this field, being a band director, females are underrepresented. And I'm grateful both of my current graduate assistants are females, who are going to be moving up through the ranks. So looking at those access points. But then I know what that means for my students who are now seeing graduate assistants, in these roles, so they can see. And I'll just be, if I may share really quickly for me,
please do.
I was one of the first Black males in a position at a predominantly white university at a Power 5 school. And that was hard for me to imagine that I would be in this position because I did not see it anywhere. So there's this cognitive dissonance that happens right? So I've never seen it. So how can I be that? You know, I was able to have some opportunities that allowed me to get here. But now I'm not the only one anymore. You know, there's a number of others who are at Power Five universities who are Black males and also a part of other underrepresented populations. You know, I hope that me being in this position, you know, help others to believe that it can be achieved. I hope so. But at the end of the day, I'm glad that it's not just me anymore. You know, so I know the power of that representation. I know what that means. And that's why I work very hard and I'm very intentional, you know, about the staff that we have in front of our students, because I want them to be able to see themselves reflected in the staff that's working with them. I hope that makes sense.
No, it does. And as you're saying, you know, when we talk about, someone texted me recently, like, hey, I'm going to come to this conference that you guys are going to be doing. You know, can you tell me more about it? And I explained to them, when we talk about access, it's not a color. You know, this is access for, as you're mentioning, you know, having women come to the forefront, to the podium. I mean, you know, back when my dad was a band director, you can probably count the influential women on a podium on maybe 2 or 3 fingers, you know, and so on. And so now, you know, we're trying to embrace and make sure there's entry levels for all people, regardless of where you're coming from and what entry level you're coming from, and feeling accepted, and really celebrating, you know, our profession in our field, and all the great strides we're doing. So when I hear you say that about your ensembles and your grad students, that's very encouraging. And I'm really delighted to hear the work that you put into that work.
Yeah, and I think another part of that is because these students were able to see, oh, that is a welcoming place. You know what I mean? So now even more folks are applying because they can see themselves in that position here. That representation piece matters so much, and I think that's huge for all of us as we continue forward.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Dr. Drain, for sharing such an exceptional insight, interactive. And thank you to our audience for being interactive too. We appreciate it. And to this
Thank you.
collegiate level perspective, on behalf of the Nat King Cole Generation Hope, we want to thank you for being with us today, Dr. Drain.
Thank you. Thank you.
And to our audience, thank you for being such a great group and like I said, participating in. We will now take a very short break to stretch and do anything else you need to do to refresh yourself for our final session of the day. We will promptly start at 3 p.m. Thank you so much. We'll be right back.